which is Federal Land Access Program. It's a great program. We've been really, really successful with it. And it's Western federal lands. So it's the Western states, and they usually have a good pot of money, and they want to get people out into the woods, into the forest. So Century Drive is a really great project for that. And that might allow us to pull this up 1 year or so. We're really working on that. We could get it designed in 2026, 2025, possibly. And then we'll see if we get that FLAP grant. But otherwise, it would be GO bond funding. Do you guys have any questions? I know that was a ton of information to throw at you at once.
Robin, short of questions. Let me just say that if there's some takeaways here for our NLA reps, one should be that the priorities can change. Sometimes they need to change. There's an opportunity for, I'm going to say streets and operations. I think it's transportation and mobility now, but there's opportunities that can be expedited. And I think we want the department to have that latitude. They will certainly try to respect our original priorities, but combined with additional funds and combined with the good news that we do have a transportation bond, which brings with it oversight, I think if there's a message, at least a message I needed to convey to my NA, is that every intent is being made to follow the original priorities, but sometimes some opportunities come up or there's some design delays. So we need to be sure not to say that this project is absolute in terms of 1 through 25. You know, we're going to try, or the department's going to try to do everything they can to deliver it in that order. But sometimes opportunities present themselves like Polar Star, and that's a good thing. So that's my comment. And if there are questions for Robin, let's get to them.
Will these slides be attached to the minutes?
Yeah, I'll send those out as soon as I can get them from Robin.
Yeah, the slides will. This spreadsheet is still draft. I'm not sure I can share it yet. So let me get it approved by David Abbas first. We were working on it just this morning and pulling in finance and things like that. And so it's close. Just don't think it's perfect yet. So.
Okay, thank you.
I see Lisa has her hand up too.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Robin, thanks for your presentation. I had a quick question. I've got two questions. The first one on Broster House with that extension of the sidewalk. Can you, you probably said it, I may have missed it. Can you clarify the additional funds for that sidewalk? Is that coming out of NSSP or is that coming out of something else?
It would come out of the GO bond. Is our proposal.
Okay.
And so that's one of the things that we will run past the oversight committee because, you know, as originally estimated, it was a little bit less than the 237 for that project. But adding the 200 feet of sidewalk, this seems like an opportunity cost. There's $8 million in that budget that's for kind of safe routes to school, safety projects, and I'm not sure what all else is in that pile. Maybe key routes. So this uses up about $4.5 million. If I were to add these up,
key routes are not included in that, Robin.
Okay,
that's
not key routes, but low stress network, maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. So I think it would be, you know, that ask for them that this would be an opportunity cost to pull it in a way that's really efficient because we've already got the designer, we've already got the contractor right there. So
sounds great. My second,
yeah, that's a great question, Lisa.
My second question kind of goes back to Campbell Drive. I still feel like we haven't completely closed the loop on that. I think that we were supposed to have another conversation, perhaps with you and David Abbas, just to talk about how that decision came about to completely cancel the project. And I'm not sure that there's necessarily any more work that we want on Campbell, but it's a process issue. So I just want to bring that up, that we still need to do that, circle back.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you and David had talked. I went on vacation and I thought you guys were meeting. And then I got back into it and I didn't ask him what was the outcome.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, yeah, I'll circle back on that. Thanks. Hi, Karen.
Robin, thank you.
I think Karen has one question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have one question. Is there any kind of evaluation done on the completed projects to see if they are doing what we thought they would do?
I've had a lot of anecdotal evidence on Northeast 12th Street. A lot of people have called and said it's definitely less volume and they're slower. I've gotten quantitative data on Harmon, and we cut the speeding on that street in half. So before the project, 67% of the folks driving on that road were exceeding 25. And now just over 30% of folks on that road are exceeding 20. And so we've really lopped the fast folks off for sure. I don't know about volumes. We just did a speed trailer out there, so I don't have the volumes yet. It seems about the same, but there's so much construction in that area that it's really hard to judge if folks are just trying to get around because Skyliners was closed and Newport is closed. And, I was like, I don't know why all these people are on the street, but maybe it's part of that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll keep following up on that.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Robin. We are going to move on to a discussion about primarily HB 2001. Vice Chair Lisa Mushel and I will be attending the council work session on April 21st. I think that's at 4:30, if I recall. Took us a while to firm up that time, but and the discussion, one of the discussions in that work session will be parking minimums. So Lisa is going to present to us information again that in some cases it'll be a repeat, in some cases there'll be some new insight, but information about HB 2001 as it relates to parking. And then after her presentation, we're going to get some input from Ian in terms of stakeholder groups, something from Pauline in terms of the sorts of parking requirements that are being proposed. And then we also asked, and thank you, Karen Swirsky, for being here, because the TSP and Karen's experience with that also has done a lot of parking studies in the core area, which could be useful to us. So with that, I will turn it over to Lisa.
Thanks, Hans. I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as we can. And I don't mean to dwell on information that we've already presented, but I'm also sensitive to some people still don't have an understanding of HB 2001 and its impacts. I also want to invite Dave Johnson to pipe in wherever you feel appropriate, Dave. But based on our conversation earlier, Dave, I'm just going to push forward until you raise your hand. So just quickly, the overview of HB 2001. This is something that is state mandated. It's something that has to be implemented. We don't have a choice here. And staff is doing whatever they can to prepare for the implementation of HB 2001. The goal is to allow middle housing in basically single family residence areas. Middle housing is defined, as you can see, duplexes, triplexes, quads. It's anything that is multi-family housing. And the makeup of the stakeholder group, I think, Pauline, if you're on, you can correct me, but I believe there are 12 individuals or so, and the makeup or the vote so far, the majority of the stakeholder group has voted to eliminate some or all of the minimum parking requirements for these types of properties. Michaela, next slide. So with the HB 2001, the code amendments that are being proposed, off-street parking is not going to be required. It's going to eliminate some of the standards for density. So as part of the review of code, we're looking at lot coverage, Florida area standards, lots of variables here. So this is going to look a lot different than today's climate. We're looking at reducing the minimum lot size for the multiplexes. And this is not finalized, but this is kind of where we're at so far. And you'll see a summary of this here soon when we finalize the information before it goes to Planning Commission or to the council. The only remaining standards will be the setbacks and the 30-foot height limit. Everything else is probably going to change. The consequences of the decisions, this is really the first chance that the community has had to get involved with these code changes. So this is something that is really important to me. And one of the reasons that I got involved with neighborhood associations and the NLA, we had a whole lot of community complaints that they weren't involved in the decision-making process. And the stakeholder group is one avenue by which people get involved. And I think it's really important that the stakeholder group and the NLA subsequently, that we're pushing information out to our neighbors to help them understand what's coming around the corner. Otherwise, this is going to get adopted and people are going to be up in arms saying, why didn't you tell me? So that's the whole gist of this. The no standards approach, this is something that that is happening in a lot of other areas of the country. You know, if we're going to have the densification, then you're basically going to look at some single family or previously single family residence lots that now have become McMansions because of the changes. So how does that fit with your neighborhood? How does that work with the members of your neighborhood association? And does it work? In some cases it will, in some cases it'll be appropriate, maybe in some cases it won't. The general feeling from the 5 neighborhood association related members of the stakeholder group that I've been in touch with is that the code amendments are going way beyond unreasonable cost or time delays in terms of implementing this. And the changes are basically going to let the developer determine the needs. Let the builder, let the developer determine the needs of the community. That's a little bit of a concern for us. That takes the ownership of this out of neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So I brought this up previously. Sorry if it's a repeat. We've got some compliance concerns, we've got parking concerns, and we've got process concerns. The compliance concerns, we have not seen any evidence. We haven't found anything out there. Nothing has been presented during the stakeholder group that really points to this being a cost barrier with related to parking requirements. So I think that there's anecdotal evidence that people are saying, well, you know, if you create a garage and you create parking space, that could have been living quarters. But we haven't seen truly any evidence in any other jurisdiction, and we haven't really talked about it at the stakeholder group level. It's been pushed aside. The parking concern, when we say, you know, this is a frequent point of contention, and this kind of relates to the does parking matter efforts. The state has had a particular direction that they wanted to go to, and we're going past what the state recommended. We feel like there needs to be a little bit more debate, a little bit more discussion, and that was the whole purpose of creating Does Parking Matter by that subgroup. The process concerns that we're making or that we're raising is around the makeup of the group. It feels a little bit like it's stacked, and I've talked about that before. I don't mean to point fingers or be, you know, adversarial in any way. I just think that when we look at these stakeholder groups or these community sounding boards, that we need to take a look and make sure that they are even in their approach. Most of the majority positions have been adopted with little or no evidence. Next slide, please. This is a little bit of a picture of where we're headed. So you've got a picture of a 3,000 square foot duplex there on the left. It's got a total of 8 bedrooms, which I was a little surprised at. That means 4 bedrooms per duplex. And with that, it has as many as 7 vehicles parked out front. So that's probably a roommate situation. It's probably, you know, each individual is renting out a room. And I guess we should be impressed that they don't have 8 vehicles, but 7 vehicles parked out front. There's no real parking provided. What you see in the middle with that yellow box, the yellow box, that represents a 40 by 100 square foot lot, a 4,000 square foot lot. And then the gray, that shows you what could go in there. So that shows you a little bit of where the setbacks would occur and how much area could be available for anything other than the actual structure, the actual living quarters. So with the current projection of this committee, the feeling of this committee, there's going to be no standards really. It'll be a 3-story building. It'll have 2 times the square footage than currently allowed, 2 times the number of bedrooms, and 2 times the number of parking. So we just want to raise the question, is that compatible with your neighborhood? It's going to fit in some places. It's certainly going to fit maybe in the areas where transit is available. It's not necessarily going to fit in other places. Dave?
Let me jump in here. Let me give you an example. Most people that have been concerned with this development approach have said that it only applies to new development. And most people think that new development has to do with new master plans or new development areas. But what is not being explained is that new development could be, for example, I sell my house to a developer. I'm on 0.47 acres, which turns out to be 20,473 square feet, which potentially could be divided into 5 of these lots. This would allow a developer to build 5 of this example of buildings at the end of my cul-de-sac. Imagine 5 buildings like this in a cul-de-sac. That is new development. It's not part of a master plan, but if I sold my house today to a developer, that would be possible. Right now, there's just my 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath house on it and a fish pond. But yeah, it could be 5 condos or 5 3-story buildings on the end of my cul-de-sac. Imagine what the parking would be like. So I mean, this is something to consider before you move forward. You have to understand that new development includes infill.
Thanks, Dave. Those are good points. I do want to make sure that everybody understands that the members that are attending as part of the stakeholder group, we are absolutely not against affordable housing. And we recognize that there's a terrific need here in Bend and that we do need to find some solutions. But we also feel like it needs to be a balanced equation between what exists today and what the needs are, so that we don't take too much away from current residents. So many people moved here to Bend because they wanted more of a rural lifestyle. And this densification, this is a little bit of a different approach. Remember where it came from, and remember, you know, a lot of the goals were looking at major metropolitan areas outside of Portland, and that may not necessarily fit in Bend. So we just have to ask those questions. Next slide. And this was the whole gist of why did we push out a survey? Why did this subgroup feel like we needed to take it upon ourselves to push something out and take the pulse of the community? We have to remember why we have neighborhood associations. Remember that we're trying to increase citizen participation in local decision making. That means it goes beyond just the council making recommendations or making changes. If the council doesn't have citizen input, then the council's just operating in a vacuum. So we felt it was very important for citizens to understand what was being proposed, what was being discussed, and to push it out so that they could start to have that conversation and hopefully send a few messages to the council and participate in some of the meetings. You know, our council has the goal that they are trying to promote civic engagement, and I sure hope that they take a listen and look at the survey results. The survey results were sent out by Michaela earlier. I am very impressed that we had more than 1,000 people that responded to the survey, and overwhelmingly, you know, this is a topic that people absolutely want to talk about. And the Does Parking Matter group has been, if you want to call it, criticized that the survey maybe wasn't worded appropriately or something like that. You know, that's fine. We just wanted to start the conversation. The group just wanted everybody to take part in the conversation, and we hope the council will take a listen.
Let me butt in again, Lisa. We are charged with land use education, and we are putting together a whole process of education about land use. However, these decisions about how the BDC is going to be updated to comply with HB 2001 is going to happen before we are able to get our land use education package in front of City Council and the Planning Commission so that they can release it to the public. And that's why that we are reaching out under our mandate of community education about land use. So that was our motivation in doing the Does Parking Matter. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. I do want to clarify the Does Parking Matter activities. That was not an NLA activity. It really wasn't any particular neighborhood association activity. It was made up of several people that were participating in the stakeholder group and a few other concerned citizens saying, what can we do here? But we hope that the results are interesting to the council. We hope that they'll take a look. You know, again, to have more than 1,000 people respond to a survey, this is one of the most comprehensive or rather voluminous reports from any other survey that I have known about over the last 5 years. We just have never had that level of participation and that level of clarity around who participates. I do want to point out that the majority of folks, I can't remember exactly the percentage, but it was very surprising that I know that it wasn't even 55% of the people that took the survey that were part of neighborhood associations. So I do want to say, wow, that's a great opportunity for us and for all of the neighborhoods, that the remaining people that were not a part of neighborhood associations now have some inkling that of what neighborhood associations are about. We're about educating, we're about informing, we're about representation, and this was a great activity in that regard. We did push this out on social media, as well as we asked neighborhood association land chairs if they could push this in front of their boards and push it out to their members. So that was kind of a surprise to not have as many people take the survey and be a part of the neighborhoods. Something happened with social media. I certainly am not going to take credit for it. That credit belongs to somebody else who she must have done some wizardry to get that many people to take the survey. Hans, I think you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of points before we move on to Ian and Pauline and Karen if we need to. I think the number was 42%. So more than 4 out of 10 people that responded to this survey were not NA affiliated, that is, and they may not even known exactly. There was a question, which NA do you belong to? It was provocative. But I do see that as an important statement about the value of social media to our NAs, but also it's an opportunity. Obviously this is a hot topic, and just getting some dialogue going, the hope would be that getting the dialogue going takes us in a direction where we have opportunities to try and reach compromise and consensus. And I will reiterate that Lisa made the point, and I'll reiterate, this was not an NLA subgroup. So when she says subgroup, it's not an NLA subgroup. It's a group of concerned people that felt this was an issue to be studied. And in addition, I should say, no city resources were used on this survey. It was an independent survey done by a group of concerned citizens. So if anyone wants to know about a city affiliation on this, there is none. So put that to bed in case that's a question. And with that, I'd like to move on to Ian to help us frame or speak to some of the stakeholder issues. Or Lisa, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It looks like Counselor Megan Perkins has her hand up.
Apologies.
Yeah, no problem. I just had a quick comment about this. As you mentioned, we'll be discussing this at the April 21st meeting. Not only will we be hearing presentations from the NLA, but also from BDAB, from the Affordable Housing Committee and the Planning Commission, all on HB 2001. So encourage you to listen into the work session at 5 o'clock on the 21st.
4:30. 4:30.
4:30 is executive session, so we'll be back in to the regular work session at 5.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. We have been going back and forth with several people. And
yeah, it's been changing a lot. So.
Okay, good. And before we move on, are there any other comments from any other NLA members? Chris, looks like you have your hand up, and then I'm wondering if NLA wants to take any kind of action here. Go ahead, Chris.
You said this HB 2001 would lead to McMansions, and I don't really know what a McMansion is. So just for clarification, what's a McMansion?
Basically, Chris, what we're saying is that on any lot that was previously a single family residence, we're looking at much greater densification of that lot. So there's going to be a higher level of development that will be allowed on that particular lot, whether it is a single family, larger home, or if it is a multi-unit development. You're not going to have as much green space, you're not going to have as many trees, you're not going to have as much open space. You could have a much larger building structure. So I think that's what's really meant by McMansion.
I get that, but all the conversation here has been about little homes to improve density, not a castle.
It kind of goes back to what Dave was talking about. He's living in this single family residence community or this area, and now all of a sudden, what could happen is somebody could buy his house. He decides to sell. So a developer could decide to buy his house, and all of a sudden a 3-story structure with much greater lot coverage could go in there. So you could have, single family homes on either side, and then all of a sudden something really huge in the middle. What's that going to look like, and what's the impact to the community?
Well, it's just the rhetoric. What you described doesn't sound like a mansion to me. So I don't know why you use that term. A large eyesore hotel is what you're opposed to, not mansions.
Thanks, Chris. Any other comments? Any other? Jim Christo, looks like your hand's up.
Yes, it is. Thank you. And Lisa, I know you covered the fact that the vote was always a majority vote. I would suggest that when you go to the council that you kind of give some backup to that. Like if there's 7 members of, real estate developers, architects, real estate agents, always outvoting other members, that gives quite a better view of just the problem that we're up against with the process here. And as you said, it's not very not balanced. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Hans, your hand is up, as well as Kathy. So Hans, you.
Right. So I was just going to say, I think we need to hear Kathy's comments, and then let's remember that this is a work session yet to be held, so your input's valuable, but I'd like to give Ian and Pauline and Karen some time as well. So Kathy?
Yeah, real quickly, I think that there's a safety issue here, because if you put all those cars from those larger units onto many streets, there will not be passage for fire or police vehicles, mostly fire and rescue vehicles. And I've seen many towns and cities limit parking to one side of the street or put up no parking signs. So if we're going to get to no parking signs, because we have 10 times more vehicles associated with these kind of things. And if I were a developer, why would I build a duplex over building a fourplex? Why wouldn't I just want to maximize things? And just the McMansion stuff means that instead of a single family home with regular setbacks going in next to you, you could have a house that's twice the size of anything else in your little neighborhood on your street, and that you would be very close to this other house rather than having space between you and the other house. That's what I got out of it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you, Chairman. I'll turn it over to you to call on our other guests.
Thanks, Lisa. Let's move on and give Ian a shot to help us frame stakeholders, et cetera.
Hey, folks. Yeah, I'm happy to answer maybe questions primarily, because I think I know what some of them have been, but maybe not all of them. So let me start with the ones I've heard. I understand that there have been some ongoing questions, not necessarily about the composition of that advisory group, although I know there are questions there, but particularly with regard to whether some members of that advisory group have conflicts that somehow need to be declared or disclosed. And I'll say to that, the short answer is no. And the reason is because I think, as we've talked about before, this stakeholder group is an advisory group to staff. This group itself is not making recommendations to a governing body, either the Planning Commission or City Council. It's simply helping staff put together proposed code changes that will then go through the regular process with public input at both the Planning Commission and Council levels. It is a stakeholder group, which by definition, depending on how one looks at it, includes people that have various stakes, expertise, involvement with the issues and outcomes. So while I do understand that there are ongoing questions about the composition and maybe balance of this group, and I think those are obviously fine to keep discussing, I do think it is important to at least try to put this conflicts issue to bed. From a legal perspective, there aren't conflicts problems with members of the group, and that's mostly because of their role as advising staff, not decision makers at the Planning Commission or Council level. So let me stop there and see if there are any questions about the conflicts component of this before we go further.
Since I'm the one that brought up the conflict of interest, I appreciate your input, and I thoroughly understand the fact that we are not going to be required to disclose any potential conflicts. So thank you for that explanation.
Okay, thanks. Other issues. I mean, I frankly don't know that I have much to say on some of the ongoing concerns about the balance of the group. I understand the concerns, but I think we've talked about that. happy to try to answer questions about that if there are any. I heard what you said, Lisa. I appreciated it. I kind of took that as you representing a viewpoint, maybe not necessarily seeking answers, but representing a viewpoint. If there are questions that can be answered, I'm happy to try. But in addition to that, one other thing that I think is worth talking about is kind of the role of the advisory group or stakeholder group and its members going forward as we do have work sessions and public hearings at the Planning Commission and Council level. So because of what I just alluded to, that this group is not constructed to, as a group, provide recommendations to the Planning Commission or Council, but instead to provide input to staff. If members of this group want to participate in the upcoming public hearings, they should do that as individuals. There's obviously nothing preventing, much less or even discouraging, a member of this stakeholder group from testifying in an individual capacity at one of the public hearings on this. But I do think we need to be a little bit mindful, because this the stakeholder group contains representatives from the NLA. It contains members of the Planning Commission. I believe there's a member of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee on the group. Is there a BDAB member in the group? I can't recall. Oh, Michaela might be saving me. She is saving me. Great. So here's the roster. So to the extent we have members of this group that want to participate in the upcoming hearings at the Planning Commission and the work session or the hearings at the Planning Commission or City Council, we all need to be very mindful of what capacity they're participating, so it's clear. One example is if a member of the Affordable Housing Committee is participating in any of the upcoming proceedings, they need to be very clear whether they are participating as a member of the Affordable Housing Committee, or sorry, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, or as an individual. Because if the former, if they are participating as a member of an appointed city committee, they really need to be focused on representing the majority view of that committee. I mean, that's what Hans and Lisa are, that's what you're going to do when you participate. You're going to be participating as representatives from the NLA. In that capacity, to the extent you're providing input, it's going to be what the NLA as a whole decided in terms of the input that was going to be provided. I would expect the members of our other appointed committees to be doing the same if they're participating as a member of that committee and representing the views of that committee. If another member of this group wants to participate as an individual, they can certainly do that. They can certainly do that through the public testimony components of the proceedings, but they just need to be clear that they're participating and testifying as an individual. That doesn't mean they can't say, yeah, I was on the stakeholder group and participated in a lot of the work to put these recommendations together, but they need to be very clear when and if they're testifying, that they're testifying as an individual, not as a representative of this group. Because as I said earlier, again, harping a little bit, this group wasn't built to provide recommendations to the Planning Commission or the Council. It was built to help staff put together proposals for the Planning Commission and the Council to consider with public input. So for those who are interested in this and have participated, you all just need to be very careful how you frame your participation going forward. I'm really not, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. I think NLA folks on this call understand this, but for those who are concerned about this advisory group, its composition, or the roles that its members may play going forward as we move towards hearings at the Planning Commission and City Council, I can tell you, and I hope this will be reassuring, that I think staff, including myself and the City Attorney's Office, will try to be, I think, mindful and watchful of how people are framing their participation, so that the decision makers, Planning Commission and Council, can be clear about who's speaking and in what capacity. I can't promise you that we are going to see it necessary to sort of burst in and clarify on the spot during hearings, but I think it's something that we probably need to figure out how to communicate in an advisory capacity to members of this group going forward, who may be participating in the Planning Commission and Council proceedings, just to make sure that they're clear about in what capacity they're testifying or participating.
Ian, thank
Ian,
you.
I think Pauline has had her hand up for a while. I think she may want to dovetail on something you discussed, Pauline.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to highlight, Michaela put up the composition of the stakeholder advisory group, and I've heard many times that there's about 12 people on there. So I think it's just good just to let everyone know who's on there. There's 15 members on the advisory group. The NLA has 2 people representing the NLA. There's only 1 planning commissioner and 1 member from the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. We do have Audrey Allen, who does affordable housing developments as a designer. Jesse Russell's on the committee. He has been developing on the small side. So he does the cottage housing and small dwelling units, like around 900 square feet or smaller typically. We have 2 larger developers with Polish and Hayden Homes on the committee. And then we have some organizations on the committee as well. Karna's with the Central Oregon Builders Association. We have Moe, who's with Central Oregon Land Watch, and I believe is also a neighborhood association board member. Alexis Vidal is with 1,000 Friends. And then we have, and I believe Sarah Santa is no longer part of the Southern Crossings Neighborhood Association board member. So I need to update this table, but we'll just consider a resident. And then Bill Bernardi and Mike Walker, 2 additional neighborhood association members.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. I'm going to point out that we've gone beyond our time frame, so let's try to be succinct if we have other questions or comments. Ian, did we give you fair time to discuss your bullet points?
I think so. Yep.
Okay. Are there any pressing questions in terms of anything Ian spoke to or Pauline? Jim Christo.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. I know, Ian, you talked about, I guess, the role of this advisory committee. And yet later on in your discourse, you used kind of the word recommendation. And I'm just wondering if you can clarify, is it the output of this advisory committee recommendations to the city staff? And if so, does that make any difference into your analysis? Thank you.
No, good question. And I think I heard myself use recommendation in a couple of different contexts. The key issue is it's not really the product, i.e. a recommendation, it's where it's directed. This group is making, we can say recommendations to city staff. I mean, you could also characterize it differently, but what constitute the key element in determining whether it's a public, all of a sudden you have all of these additional rules that you have to follow, is whether the group is making a recommendation to another governing body, which in this context would be Planning Commission or Council. So this group can make all the recommendations it wants to city staff, which is what I think it's doing, and not present a public meetings issue or all the attendant stuff that goes with it. So it's really the recipient of the work, whether it's a recommendation or something else, versus the work product. And if that answers the question, sorry, Hans, I think Pauline may want a chance to cover some things that I missed or didn't get to, if we can do it fairly quickly.
Pauline?
I just wanted to clarify a couple things on the presentation that was given. One of the items that said that was going to be struck from the code is lot coverage. That is not being struck from the draft. We are keeping the lot coverages that we have today, except a little bit of cleanup, removing a date of 1998, and I won't go into details about that. The height said 30 feet. There are zones that allow 35 feet, and so we're not changing any of the height requirements. I just want to make sure that it's not just 30, that there are areas that allow 35. The density is going away, the maximums that is required by the House bill. So it really wasn't up for too much discussion with the stakeholder advisory group, because the House bill clearly states that we have to do away with the maximum densities. And then for parking, we are in compliance with what is being required of us for the House bill and or model code. For the duplexes, quads, townhouses, and cottage clusters, we are matching what is drafted or in the model code and or the administrative rules. The only one that is not, possibly I'd have to look at the text, would be triplexes where we're proposing no parking. I believe the OARs may allow that, but it also has some minimal parking requirements. Oh, and then one last thing, just for clarification, I thought I heard Dave say that he could possibly take his large lot and make 4 new lots. I believe his zoning is the low density residential, so it would not be 4,000 square foot lots, it would be 10,000 square foot lots. So just details. And as we get the draft together, it'll hopefully come together a little bit better for everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline. They're details, but they're important details. Appreciate the clarification. Lisa?
Yeah, I think that maybe Pauline and maybe Mike Walker are working on some kind of grid to summarize all of these things. That would be incredibly helpful to all of the land use chairs. And that's something that we have been asking for a little while, and we just haven't been able to get it. So if there's something available, we'd like to see that sooner than later. And I do appreciate the attention to detail. So thank you, Pauline, for bringing.
Okay, just for clear, I'm not working on a chart. Maybe Mike Walker is. He's sent me one, and I've provided some clarifications to his work, but I am not currently preparing a comparison chart.
Okay, I think I also sent an email some time ago asking if it would be possible to have something like that. It's desperately needed in order for us to understand all of the details. Let's see. Michaela, I think I had a next slide.
Yeah, so if we're ready to transition into the land use updates, I just want to make sure.
I think we had one more slide, but if not, then before we move into the land use working group update, I just want to ask if there's any other questions. Is there anything that the NLA members feel like we need to do prior to the work session for next week?
I found it.
Great. Thank you. So this outlines the next steps. The draft code is supposed to be completed. I think, Pauline, you communicated that it'll be done by next Friday for the committee review. There is another meeting of HB 2001 stakeholder group as of April 28th. That meeting's from 1 to 3, and anybody can listen in on the conversation. So I encourage those of you who are interested to do so. Then my understanding is that there will be a presentation of the code changes to the Planning Commission, then to the council. And we still feel like the community needs to learn more to get involved in the discussion. And I guess that's what I'm looking for from my NLA co-members is, do you feel like there's anything that needs to happen in order to push it forward, to push some kind of comment to Planning Commission or Council about what we feel or basically the pulse of the NLA and pulse of the community?
Lisa, I'm going to volunteer that I think there is a collective understanding that there are concerns. I don't know, I think it's probably premature for us to have a motion to take a position on this, but I think as representatives to council, we have an opportunity to share this information. I appreciate Pauline clarifying a couple of technicalities. We want to certainly go in completely informed and with current information, but I'm going to venture that unless there are those that don't think that there's an understanding that what we're trying to do is express to council some of the concerns that have been identified to the NLA. I think we have sufficient support to present our concerns pretty much consistent with your presentation here to City Council. And
Great.
if others are completely opposed to that, I really need to hear it.
I can't see anyone else. So with that, I think that concludes that topic. And Michaela, I think that you may have, oh, it looks like Councillor Megan Perkins has something else to add.
Sorry, I know you're trying to move on. I just wanted to also, mention that after we have this HB 2001 update, as you all know, we will also be having the parking minimums discussion. And that hopefully, if you have a chance to view that, there'll be, you know, a lot of really informative, hopefully will help clear up some of these lines of confusion that are happening right now, because it'll be, I mean, it is just a work session. There's no specific action. It's about just learning more about parking minimums. So just wanted to encourage you all again to listen to that.
Thank you. And I think you're going to have quite a few people attending and listening and adding to the conversation. But also everyone should be aware that during the work session, council can make a recommendation or can direct staff to take additional steps.
That's absolutely true.
So just be mindful of that. Michaela, I think I'm ready to talk land use working group update. And yeah, you're going to skip ahead. Terrific. I know you guys have seen this slide. We're still working on the documents. I got to tell you, it's a tough slog, but with how many people are reviewing the documents each time, Michaela? Is it something like 9 people?
Well,
No,
yeah.
At least 5 staff and 7 people on our group.
Yeah, and then I got to also mention with great respect that we've got attorneys involved and engineers involved and grammar Nazis. I'm teasing, but you know, it's a little bit of a slog to get through these documents. And I am very happy that we at least have 3 more documents in front of you this evening. We continue to work mostly on the community guide. The rest of the documents really are focused under the community guide resources. And the 3 documents you have in front of you this evening are all frequently asked questions. These were prioritized, and we felt like this information was going to be a good service to the community. With someone's approval motion this evening, we can adopt these and get them out on websites and start to use them. So do I have any questions from among the NLA? You were given these frequently asked question documents with the agenda. You've had an opportunity to review them. If you have any suggestions, comments, now is a great time to bring them up.
Jim Christo?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for that introduction, Lisa. Yes, it is quite a slog to kind of make sure the documents are kind of consistent with each other. I do have one suggestion of maybe adding a sentence that was captured in one of the FAQs, but curiously not in another. And I know from long experience working on documents that frequently happens. So I would like to be able to move that we basically include this one sentence in the land use applications. I'm sorry, it's into the land use notifications, frequently asked questions, and it's in the land use applications frequently asked questions. If you want to put that up on the screen, I can show you what sentence I'm talking about. Thank you.
And so I don't know that Michaela was ready to push that document up to the screen. She seems to be madly working to find it. And I really appreciate Michaela's organizational skills right now. So thank you. Here it comes.
Like all my folders. Sorry, it should come up soon. I've got a million things going on.
All right, it looks like it's up. Jim, direct us to the sentence.
Okay, if you can go to page 3, it's in the paragraph, when can I comment on a land use application? Okay, so let's see. starting 1, 2, 3, fourth line down, it says this meeting is the most direct opportunity that the public has to converse with the applicant before things are finalized. And that is a very good statement. I think it tells you it's basically the best opportunity that we have, the public has. And my suggestion is that statement be also included in the land use notification FAQs. Thank you.
Do we have any other
Okay.
comments? Any conversation about that? Everyone's good with it? Can I?
I would say that I move to approve the FAQs, subject to the addition of the sentence that Jim proposed. And I would ask that these resources be made available to the city as soon as the community education portion of the land use education plan is complete. That is the motion. Is there a second to that?
I want to clarify that I think these frequently asked questions can be made available not at completion, but in the interim. Michaela, can you clarify that for us?
Yeah, we can definitely send them out to the neighborhood associations and land use chairs. That's awesome. I think there's just not a place quite yet for it to live on the city's website. And so once we have that drafted and ready to go, it'll also be on the website.
Thank you. And my point of clarification is I don't want to just hold these documents until the very end or the completion of the education program. Let's push them out as soon as we can.
Under those.
That was the intent of my words. Dave?
Under those conditions, I will second Hans' motion.
Okay, the motion is seconded. All in favor? And if I can't see all of your hands, are any opposed to that? Okay, I think we have a unanimous decision on that.
Thanks, everybody. The last slide, Michaela, is just a reminder of where we're at in the process. And we still have a bit of time. We were hoping to get through the rest of the community guide and documents between April, May, and June. And I think that's going to be a tough call for the group, but we're going to do the very best that we can. And then in June and July, we're hoping to have some community workshops with neighborhood associations, as well as roll this out fully to all of the land use chairs and just hold some workshops so that we can make sure we've got great product and great resources for everyone to use for land use resources. So I guess maybe we are getting close.
I would like to thank everybody that has participated in this discussion today. A lot of things that were not clear have been cleared up, and I just want to pass on my appreciation to both the NLA, the Land Use Working Group, and to the staff that has been cooperating with us very closely. My congratulations to you and my appreciation. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. And I would chime in and say, I think that when we started this out, I'm not sure that we appreciated all the quality input we would get to provide as many documents as possible. And we'll find out over time the effectiveness of this education plan, but it certainly has expanded. And I appreciate that staff has been patient with us as we continue to add more and more resources. And I'm going to be speaking to council through Councilor Perkins that we're going to look for continued support because we've identified work product that we probably can't complete by June 30, but we think it is really important. We think it's of value, and we think that continued support by staff obviously has to come from council because we're going to ask for some support going into the new fiscal year, but it is important and we're trying to expedite as much as we can. So I kind of need to put that out there that we're going to be looking for just a little more support because we did expand the scope, and I think the work product is going to show it over time. And that being said, next topic up is, Lisa, did I miss you?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. All good. Thank you.
Next topic up is Boundaries Working Group. We are still in the process of looking for a little more clarification on direction and such. I don't want to avoid giving Karen an opportunity. I know there's no April meeting scheduled at the moment, but Karen, if there's anything you need to share on behalf of the Boundaries Working Group, it's all yours.
We're just in a holding pattern right now. We're trying to figure out what exactly we will be working on, whether it's a code change related to annexing of new areas, or if there's work for us in the review of the effectiveness of neighborhood associations. Michaela, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think a good thing right at this point is to point out that we're going into strategic planning soon. We did have an approval of a consultant, Jen Rusk, many of you have worked with, who will be helping us do a strategic planning workshop, which we're hoping to be able to do in May. And so I think that that will really outline what this working group will be able to do and what they're going to be focused on, as well as some more clarification with council goals and the work plan that's going into what the NLA might be supporting. So I think right now, just today was the due date for those surveys from the NLA. If your neighborhood association has not yet taken the survey, I would encourage you to do that. We have, I think, 8 or 9 that have submitted, but there's still a few more that we need. And in order to have a successful strategic planning, we want to know where everybody else is at. So you have a little bit of time, but not much. So I'd appreciate final responses soon.
Yeah, the deadline's today, by the way.
And one of those questions was if you think boundaries should be a priority of the NLA. And so we were waiting to see what the other neighborhood associations said to kind of reassess what our direction might be. So holding, sorry. So
No,
thank you
good
for your
point, Karen.
patience.
And Karen, to that point, I think if we find from the survey input from the NAs that they prioritize boundaries, I think that's the sort of information that council would want to take into consideration as they, develop goals or what level of support to give it. And we'll see, hopefully we get the last few stragglers coming in pretty soon.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Wildfire Resiliency Plan Steering Committee, long name for something that's on hold. And on hold for good reason, because the state is doing some important information and work. And I know it's on hold. We'll get to that in time. Sean McFadden, is there anything you need to tell us on that other than it's on hold, which you already reported last month?
Yeah, that's it. There's nothing happening.
Okay, and this is consistent. Other jurisdictions are doing the same thing. I mean, obviously, there's no sense putting a lot of work into something to find out that the state has a different direction. Dave Johnson.
Yes, I've been asked by my board to mention to the wildfire committee that the southeast abuts the forest, and we could be in danger of the same destruction as the northwest. So Old Farm would like to be, and Southeast would like to be included in all of the discussions about the wildfire committee.
I hear you, Dave, and I would say that maybe Lisa has an opportunity to speak to that further regarding her event on April 22nd when we do reports. And I would say we've talked about this before, and we use Paradise, California as an example. Much of the destruction there was caused by homes that weren't defensible, embers that were carried from miles away. So to your point, Dave, just because the west side may feel a little more exposed and vulnerable because of the forest, it doesn't mean that any other part of the city isn't vulnerable. So good point. Totally support everyone getting involved in this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close out before reports. I'm going to close out with, I guess, a thank you to the city. The NLA has been pretty vocal about saying we want to be included, we want to be a resource, we want to be a part of the discussion, the dialogue, and we certainly want to promote the idea that there's more and more community and citizen involvement. And to that end, I want to say thank you to council and staff for the creation of a sounding board. Sounding board is addressing two particular points when it comes to solutions for homelessness. And this will ultimately, this is an expedited program, meaning that there is an intent within the next 6 months to make recommendations and strategies to council for implementation on homelessness solutions. And I asked Michaela to bring up this slide because this is really critical. And I just want to point out that we kind of had a problem when city just asked staff to study the possibility of Juniper Ridge as an opportunity for a managed camp. And it was merely a request to study, but that request by council came as a surprise to most of us, or all of us, and certainly to the NA that was affected greatly or potentially. So I'm hoping to get out in front of this by saying that when you look at this slide, again, it's a compressed program. The first 2 months, meaning the second and fourth Wednesdays of April and May, there will be important dialogue. And note that in May, peer communities, what is needed, what would work for Bend. I really want to encourage you to promote this sounding board to your NAs. Try and get people, if they have the time, please get them to attend and hear the dialogue. Because again, this is a situation where we're going to start talking about really important potential code changes and recommendations to council. And I would hate for us to be doing that. And then after we draft language and consideration, a la, if you look at the June timeframe, BDC draft language consideration of public input. Okay, I'm putting on my NLA hat here, clearly. I think we ought to ask first, what does the community think about these things? And then think about how we draft code changes. But at the same time, I understand the point of view that you have nothing for direction to say to the community. So I get that, but I want to encourage you all. I am the representative, I am the NLA representative, and I appreciate the opportunity. I asked for it, and I appreciate this opportunity, but I am not alone in this. So please encourage your members, if they can, to attend, especially the April and especially the May meetings, so they will understand that this is an expedited effort, but expedited doesn't mean trying to avoid community input and citizen input. But we just don't have the time to do the kind of outreach we'd like to do before we start getting into the meat of the work. So, enough said on that. Moving on to reports.
Just a second, Hans, Councilor.
Yes, thank you.
I just wanted to butt in and say that I'm really excited about tomorrow's first meeting for the sounding board. I'm the liaison to this group as well. And I totally agree with you, Hans. It's so important that we don't have a situation where the process moves along to the finish and then the public gets involved when it's, you know, when we're already basically done with the process. So I would just want to reiterate, please stay involved in this as we go through it. Please give us your thoughts and opinions as we move forward. We are trying to meet a need very quickly, but that does not mean that we should not have public input as we go forward. So,
thank you, Councilor. And I'll point out, I think it was today that the Bend Bulletin, I think it was today. If it wasn't today, it was yesterday. The Bend Bulletin announced the sounding board group. And again, it'd be wonderful if we could take lots of time and get great deals of input, and we certainly want to do that, but this is a fast schedule. It's in the fast lane. And so we just really need to do our part to encourage people, let them know what's happening, ask for input. I understand people are busy, but all we can do is put it out there and do everything we can to get as much input as possible. And if we don't do that, then shame on us, frankly. So let's move on to reports.
Karen?
Karen has her hand up.
I just have a question. How can we get notice about when the meetings are? If you want us to. Yeah.
The meetings are second and fourth Wednesdays of April and May, 9 to 11. And for a contact point, Susanna Gilbert is your contact point. So, and Michaela can facilitate making sure that we all know about the meetings. Again, there's one tomorrow morning. It's a little late to tell you about that one. But there's certainly plenty of time to get everyone on board for the next meeting. And tomorrow's just it's not necessarily a meet and greet. We'll get some work done, but it is a kickoff meeting. So tomorrow might not be as critical as
Can we get the credentials, Michaela, to sign
Yeah,
in?
and we have Susanna on. She has her hand raised, so I just wanted to give her a chance. Maybe she can respond better than I.
There she is. My bad. Susanna.
Let's see, am I unmuted now?
You are.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Let's see. So I don't know how I can show my video, but anyway, yeah, you can sign up on the Sounding Board website. Michaela can get the link to you for updates of the meetings, but yeah, they're going to be the second and fourth Wednesdays in April and May, and then we'll probably start meeting once a month after that. So yeah. So go ahead and attend if you want to, and it's going to be good, quick. Tomorrow's going to be.
Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Oh, no, it's okay. And tomorrow will be kind of introductory. We'll spend some time on committee rules and stuff like that. So tomorrow's not probably super critical to attend, but the next one I think will be more informative and focused on the topic of transitional housing and shelter types. So.
Thanks, Susanna.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to reports, I'll kick it off. From an ABNA point of view, we are pursuing an ABNA specific mailer. We are also going to take advantage of the saturation mailer that Michaela is developing. We have had excellent results from mailers in terms of membership increase. Our last one took us from, I think, 600 members to 800 members. That was significant, and we're hoping for good things. We are teed up and we are getting ready to get in touch with Ty Combs to request radars and at specific locations that we think are critical in ABNA. So if you are not tuned up to do that, I encourage you to do that. We did, I would say, promote or encourage our members to consider the doesparkingmatter.com site. And I would tell you that 20% of our members took that, approximately 20% of our registered members took that survey. So that's a relatively large percentage compared to other surveys that we've seen, and the participation level is high. So it would appear that that's a hot topic, and hopefully that starts some really good dialogue. And then I would share that even though the wildfire resiliency subcommittee is on hold, ABNA is planning to continue to have dialogue with Summit, certainly Century West and probably River West, but we continue to plan to have dialogue with our neighbor NAs, particularly with respect to developing an evacuation plan rather than waiting for state laws. It's something that the subcommittee wasn't going to address anyway. I think it's something that's near and dear to Summit. It's certainly near and dear to ABNA. It's come up in our board meetings. Some of our smaller groups, some of our smaller HOAs, frankly, have a one way in, one way out situation. That's kind of alarming. So we are planning to initiate. So you probably knew this was coming, Sean and Lisa, but we're going to start some dialogue with you guys working on an evacuation plan. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Thanks, Hans. I kind of just want to hit ditto on your presentation, but Century West is meeting this week for our board meeting, and we're finalizing our plans for our annual meeting next week, April 22nd. The way that that's working is for the first, I think, half hour, Century West will be meeting and talking about some bylaw changes and board nominations. So that part has not been published out to the community. But then the second part is what we are publishing out to the community, and that is the Fire Ready Ben program. And that is something that we created about 3 years ago. It's something that we felt real strongly about in Century West, that we needed to educate our Century West members in particular about being ready for wildfire. And I think a lot of our communities are participating in FireWise programs, and this is an adjunct do those Firewise programs. We want to do whatever we can to promote awareness and action by neighbors to do something to get their properties ready for a wildfire event. God knows we don't want it to happen, but if we do have it happen, then we want to be prepared. Let's see. Trying to think if I have anything else to report. I'm excited to hear about working with Hans and maybe Sean on an evacuation plan. I think that's something that would be very important to our members. And gosh, I'm not coming up with anything else. That's it. I'll pass.
Karen Bergsvik.
Thanks. I just had a question. We're supposed to identify locations for the radar signs. And last year we used the sites where we put in applications for the NSP projects because we had a lot of applications regarding speeding in those 3 areas in our neighborhood. How are other neighborhoods deciding where the radar signs are going to go? And is there any city data or information that could help us with that decision? I know it's on our board meeting agenda for Thursday.
So yeah, Karen, let me just say, I will tell you briefly that ABNA is basing a lot of this on both member input. We get a lot of calls. Frankly, most of them are for speeding on Mount Washington. We're also looking at topography, some of the steeper streets where we know speeding happens. And I have to confess that I don't recall the city site, and Michaela can help us with this, but there is a city site where we can look at radar data that includes speeds and volume, and you can do that, and you can look and see what's happening in your particular neighborhood. And Michaela is probably scrambling as I say that, but we can do that after the fact unless Lisa, who has her hands up, has that exact answer.
I'm not sure if I have the exact answer, but to echo what Hans is saying, we kind of know what our trouble spots are, but we also have had specific HOAs reach out to us to say, hey, we need some help. We have an issue that is happening in our neighborhood or our community, and they are now becoming aware of the radar signs, and so they're now making specific requests. But in Century West, we know what our trouble spots are. We know it's Simpson, we know it's Mount Washington Drive, and certainly we are very, very well aware that it is Century Drive. So it's just knowing your trouble spots, and you kind of, what I've learned is that you have to rotate because you don't get the sign for very long. And you certainly don't get the sign that is going to help you canvas your entire neighborhood for the duration of the season. So you just have to kind of pick and choose and rotate. And as part of that, I do want to bring up that we had Chief Krantz attend a special meeting last month, and this was a combination effort of Aubrey and Summit and Century. And one of the items that Chief Krantz said that he would advocate for is the ability of each individual neighborhood association to have a speed radar sign that could be utilized just for that particular neighborhood. So it would be an enhancement to the current program.
Okay. Well, that gives me some ideas. And anyway, we'll continue to work on that. We're continuing to work with Century West and Southwest Bend Neighborhood Association on the COID property. So the 3 NAs are working together, and we did a tour of the property with a city council member and a Ben's Park and Rec person, did a walking tour that was very educational, and jointly did an update that went out today. So it's exciting to be working with our neighbors on this, and look forward to that. And I think that's about it.
Okay, Karen, thank you. Jim Christo.
Oh, thank you. Let's see, our board is going to be meeting this Thursday, and the mayor has indicated she will be in attendance. We had hoped to have her in attendance last month, but she had a conflict and could not make it. So we'll be spending the time with her, basically informing her and educating her what the issues that we see are, so that she'll become knowledgeable in future meetings. Let's see. We still have 2 board vacancies. We've been asking a couple people to fill, but so far no success there. I just got a report today that the Murphy Road between Country Club Drive and Peril Road is open one way, although our vice chair says last night it was not. So I don't know how accurate that that report is. This is apparently the weekly report that was sent out by the city. And also they have removed any kind of potential completion date, although talking to some of the workers, it may be as early as June 1st. So, and I know people around our community are really anxious to get that road open because it's a major thoroughfare, and you know, the detours we have to take go through some neighborhoods, and that's not the best. So we're very looking forward to it. I think that's about it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. Chris Freeze. Yep, you're muted, Chris. Chris, you're muted.
Two issues. The Deschutes River Trail along Riverfront, it's a very narrow street with poor sidewalks, and it has a lot of foot traffic come summer. And we really think the city and parks should be able to get together and either much improve the sidewalks to trail standards, which is 10 feet wide, which is of course a large sidewalk, or allow only local traffic on the street, which would leave much more room for all the bicyclers, pedestrians, and everybody else that quite frankly use the street because the sidewalks are so terrible. So we're thinking we're going to have progress there. The other issue is a final, we have a lot of cut through traffic into neighborhoods, again, to get between Franklin and Colorado. And it seems like the city can't decide whether it likes ears at the corners or speed bumps or little circles in the middle of the street there. But rather than measuring it, we already know it's an unsafe situation, and it makes the neighborhood somewhat unwalkable because of so much cut through traffic that the arterials aren't handling all the traffic. That's what we mostly talk about in our board meetings.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Johnson.
Yes, we had our board meeting last night, and one of the topics that came up that we're planning our general meeting, and what we are requesting is that someone from the city put together a briefing on navigating the new land use online system. And so I guess this is kind of an outreach to the city to step up and put together some kind of briefing that gives us some navigation ideas about using CityView. I guess we need somebody from the city or from staff to think about that and get back to us. And probably what we would do if we were able to get that briefing, we would include Southeast and Larkspur in our general meeting and try to have at least, the east side, southeast side covered with that one briefing. And I guess it would be useful for other NAs as well.
Yeah, Dave, to that point, originally, actually, Michaela and Lisa and I had hoped to have exactly that for this NLA meeting, and we weren't able to pull that off. But yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I would take the opportunity to speak to Councilor Perkins by saying that one of the reasons the land use working group needs a little extra time is our entire schedule was greatly affected by the long delays of City View, and that's no one's fault, but it really didn't facilitate the work we were trying to do. So to the extent that there's a reason that we didn't really get closure on our action items, part of it is City View. And again, no one's fault. It's just a fact of life. Dave, I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off though.
No, that's okay. I'm just asking for someone from the city to step up and put together that navigation briefing so that we can present that at our general meeting. So someone needs to get back in touch with me so I can tell my board that yes, go ahead and put some time aside for that discussion.
Dave, what's the date of the general meeting?
Great question. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, so I'm sure we can do it, unless your date's too soon.
Sorry, this is Michaela. I just wanted to pop in here because there's some stuff going on behind the scenes that you might not be aware of. With the City View trainings, since we were trying to get that on this month's agenda, we weren't able to, but we are hoping to be able to do a training at the end of the month. The tentative date right now is on Thursday, April 29th from 11 to 12. And the hope is that we can tailor the information specific to neighborhood associations and land use chairs so that it's helping you navigate, and we're going to record that. So if you're not able to attend the meeting, you will have it afterwards to take a look at. And then Dave, if you guys are wanting someone to come to your meeting and do a review at that time, you just need to reach out to me and let me know, and I'll see what I can do to
Okay, I will find out, or I will rediscover when the general meeting is going to occur, and I'll get back to you with the date.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
I guess that's the end of my report.
Okay, Sean McFadden.
We haven't met in a while, but we have managed to fill up our full board. So we're meeting tomorrow. Should be able to start taking on action items. The one thing we have been able to do is get a lot of interest from local or the smaller homeowners associations in being Firewise certified. So we've got a couple of those in process right now. Hopefully by the summer we'll get those through. And that's about it.
All good stuff. Hopefully get some of that done before the summer.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, just a reminder, folks, next month, opportunity for free debris. So if that's not on your radar, be sure it is. It starts May 1st, and it's an opportunity to clean up your yard and make things a little fire safe, and there's no charge, just haul it off and it's free. Steve Pine.
Yo, thank you. Hi. Before I start on this thing, Michaela, when you send in those the City View trainings on April 29th, the dates or wherewithal to get in the credentials and all that, will you include that the meeting of the HB 2001 update? That's April 28th, I think, from 1 to 3. I wasn't sure where that was going to be, what the credentials are for that. And then there's the public input, April and May meetings. So whatever we have to know in order to let the board know, please. Thank you. So yeah, we discuss all the time the boundaries, anxiously awaiting the next of those meetings coming up because we got 1,500 plus Payless homes coming online with the Petrosa development here. And its impact on our neighborhood and its character and so on. We're already the biggest, and so we don't really know what's going to happen. A lot of conversation about that. We got increased traffic like everybody does, and this infill housing thing is happening pretty continuously here in our Northeast area. So those are issues we're always talking about. We spent the last meeting, almost the entirety of the last meeting, we had Mike Krantz there, and some crime and safety folks came. because we had Housing Works was there, Bend Police was there. We had a drug bust over there by the Ensworth Elementary School, which I'm sure was all over the papers and everybody knew about it. So that was it was an interesting and significant kind of input on the part of everyone concerned with regards to how hard it is to actually get into somebody's place when the neighbors are making all kinds of complaints continuously. So that was enlightening to see how complex that is and what it took to make that happen. Happy to provide more information for anybody who wants to know about it. But fireworks is another big deal for us. You know, we're right here, Powell Butte, all that stuff. The chief continues to say that he doesn't have the resources to enforce the existing laws. So, you know, I don't know, we keep bumping up against that same thing. Parking, we didn't take an official position on that matter, but all the board members feel that the requirements for off-street parking should remain as they are. And I know that's a big issue for everybody, and we're certainly on board with that and looking forward to that. That's why I want to make sure we can attend those next meetings on the 28th and so on. In any event, I think that's about it. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Elizabeth Rhodes.
Yeah, so our general meeting is this Thursday, the 15th. And as of last weekend, we had 70 people registered to attend, and that's record breaking as far as I know. And that's without a reminder email to folks, so we could end up considerably higher. We will, we've got a guest speaker. ODOT is going to be talking to us about the Highway 97 South project. And so that could be a pretty big issue facing our neighborhood as that's moving on. We have been very focused on two pretty major land use issues in our neighborhood. One is the COID property, and we're continuing to work with Southern Crossing, and now Century West is involved, which we're very glad about. Let's see, we are also concerned about the illegal fireworks. We have the spot in the neighborhood called the Pit, where some very large fireworks displays have been ignited by groups over the years, and those fireworks, illegal fireworks, have started a couple of fires in nearby houses and down in the canyon. So that's definitely a big concern of ours. And our neighborhood green team will begin our very first cleanup along Brookswood on the last Friday of this month, which is the 30th. And typically they're anywhere from 4 to 7 folks that come out and walk from the Powers roundabout all the way to the Brookswood Plaza, and also out on Murphy from the roundabout there and pick up trash. And so that's, we're tuning up for that big cleanup. And I think that's about it.
My bad. Kathy Roche.
Hi, Boyd Acres Neighborhood Association. Our last meeting, we had Megan Perkins there, and we had some lively discussions with her. We have a survey out right now to figure out if we're doing a good job or not. We have a tree planting scheduled at Ponderosa Elementary on April 22nd. We plan to have our next meeting jointly with the folks who are presenting on fire ready, fire wise information. And I don't know if we've responded to where we want our speed signs. And I don't know if we've responded to, if anybody from Boyd Acres took the survey, Michaela. If we haven't, I can get on Cindy or we can do it as a board. I kind of lost track of that one. That's all I got.
Michaela? Do you have Boyd Acres input?
Sounds good. I'm checking right now.
Okay. Regarding fireworks, a couple of people have mentioned it, and Lisa and I participate in the NART meeting. I as the liaison to NART for NLA, and Lisa in regards to her role as CWNA chair. It was a discussion, and certainly there was a very graphic video shared in NART with the pit. That was an historic episode that was alarming, I guess, depending on how you look at it. But that being said, I do recall too that the collaborative meeting of CWNA Summit and ABNA, when Chief Krantz presented to us, he was very frank about his resources. In terms of a city this size, BPD is very lean. And I will tell you that notwithstanding every effort to become more efficient, more effective, use technology, the reality is law enforcement, I know for a fact, is a challenging endeavor. I know it's challenging to recruit in these days and times. And I know that recruiting law enforcement officers and training them to the point that they become proficient and useful takes a lot of time. So I think to the extent that we have concerns like fireworks or other things like traffic, and Chief Krantz was very, very candid. He has to make tough sort of law enforcement triage decisions. Do I send people to a DUI or a domestic violence situation, or do I write a ticket? Those are tough choices. That's his job. He's paid to make tough choices. I get that. But I am very sympathetic. I personally, and I'm speaking for myself, not for my board, I personally am very sympathetic to his situation and his resources and demand. I know that historically, Chief Porter and now Chief Krantz have done a great job with the resources they have. But every year, our biannual survey tells us without question, public safety has always been number one. We kind of forget about it when everything's working well, and then we can dwell on other things like affordable housing and homelessness and other social issues. But by the time we start to see a real challenge in public safety, it's almost too late to make a good course correction. So, I mean, that's my vote of support for BPD, and just an explanation that there are some real limitations for what we can expect from BPD. And we all can do things on our own. That is, be more vigilant, be more observant, not be victims of opportunities of crime, which are happening more and more. Closing garage doors, locking doors. I know it's a place we like to think we can trust anybody all the time, but the reality is we can protect ourselves from some of the crimes that are happening. And so we have a role in this. The same thing as putting down slow down signs. It's not going to solve the speeding, but it might have an effect. It's something that was within our power. So I think that we can promote to our NAs that every member, every resident has some action items they can do to help the situation out. So I'll get off my soapbox and say thank you all. Thank you, Councilor Perkins, staff. Any other comments before we close?
I do have Boyd Acres responses.
Thank you, Michaela. Well done, Boyd Acres. Okay, hey, listen, great meeting. A lot of information covered. Make notes of all those important dates that we talked about. Make sure to get the word out. Council can't respond to citizen input if they don't get it, right? So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Good night.
Good evening.